I'll be blunt. Skyrim is not the best RPG on PS4. The combat isn't as good as Nier Automata. Its open world not as big or beautiful as that of Red Dead Redemption 2 or Horizon Zero Dawn. And yet, for all Skyrim's technical limitations, for all its quirks, cracks and imperfections that have only become more obvious in the 9 years since its initial PS3 release, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim is still my favourite RPG on PS4 and one of my favourite games of all time. In this video, which is basically just an excuse for me to drone on about how much I love Skyrim again, I'm sorry everyone, I'm going to try and explain why. Mainly because I want to bank a couple of ready-made riposts for when someone, who shall remain nameless, comes at me with, The Witcher 3 is so much better! I mean, right now, all I have to say to that is, I know, The Witcher 3 is amazing, but I just like shouting people off mountains. For me, Skyrim's biggest hook is Skyrim, the place, the world, all 15 square miles of it. Oh, if I could shove a tent in the back of my car and somehow force myself into the world of a game, Last Action Hero style, I would happily retire to the wilds of Skyrim, pitch up near a river and spend my days fishing and smithing and hoping no bears or worse protagonists come along to ruin my day. But the joy of exploring Skyrim comes from more than just base sensual pleasure. I mean, yes, it looks beautiful, the pine trees, the mountains, the mist-veiled mornings, and the nights lit by the bloom of the aurora. And it sounds wonderful too, with an ambient score so organic and unobtrusive it seems to rise from the same natural elements it so effectively complements. But Skyrim isn't unique in its rugged, natural beauty. Just look at The Witcher 3, at Dragon Age Inquisition, Red Dead 2 and Horizon Zero Dawn. It's not like beautiful open worlds are rare, but there is something about exploring Skyrim that, for me, is magical in a way no other game can match. I've spent years trying to puzzle out why that is. What is it about poking around the caves, mines, mountaintops, valleys and forests of this place that I find so irresistible? I think it's down to how Skyrim positions the player, the seemingly random encounters the game throws at you, and how those two things fuse and imprint themselves on the surrounding landscape. For instance, everyone who's played Skyrim has been attacked by random bandits, right? Maybe you've had that Dark Brotherhood agent come after you, the one who, upon looting their corpse, turns out to be carrying an assassination contract with your character's name written on it.
As instructed, you were to eliminate... What the Christmas company is written down by any means necessary. The Black Sacrament has been performed. Wow. Somebody wants this poor fool dead.
These flakes of narrative are sprinkled liberally over the player during the course of your adventure, the checkpoints triggering their deployment both hidden and varied enough that they rarely happen the same way or in the same place more than once. This is important because it conjures a sense of spontaneity in Skyrim's world, the knowledge that no matter how many times you play it, and I've done so 6 times since 2011, you're never going to experience the same game twice. What Skyrim does then is build a story around you, or at least it feels like that's what it's doing. And not only that, it builds a powerful connection between landscape and narrative that means as you're plodding through the game's rock-speckled tundra and sparse, snowy wilderness, you're constantly reminded of things that have happened, of dragons slain and bandits knifed and frost troll-infested caves you had to dash away from because you weren't a high enough level. Hey, this is where I butchered that innocent farmer, you'll think to yourself. Or, This is where Lydia was killed by bandits. The world of Skyrim becomes a sort of geographical photo album, otherwise featureless fists of rock, all of a sudden taking on the kind of nostalgic significance usually reserved for, that alleyway you used to play in as a kid, a favourite walk you used to go on with your family. It's a weird sensation I think is unique to Skyrim, because these memories endure through the years and across multiple playthroughs. For instance, in my current game, Lydia is in fact alive and well. Here she is, lording it over my rather impressive property portfolio, thank you very much. And yet this picturesque autumnal glade deep in the rift is the place where, many years ago, she tragically fell while protecting me from a bandit ambush. In a way, these procedural events are the seeds from which the real story of Skyrim grows, and it's one that exists primarily in the imagination of each player. You play through the game and save the world from Alduin and lead either the Imperials or Stormcloaks to victory in the Civil War, things every Skyrim player does. But the real story, the real legend of the Dragonborn, is the one that blossoms in your mind. Where did you go? What did you see? I remember things like desperately using a mountain as cover while an elder dragon hurled fire at me, defeating it at last, and watching its remains slide down the slope, feeling every bit as epic as Gandalf fighting the Balrog and smiting his ruin on the mountainside. I remember fighting off a lower level dragon in Riverwood, thinking it was job done, only to turn around and find Alvor the blacksmith lying dead over his forge. Of all the character deaths I've ever experienced in a game, this one sticks in the memory longer than most. There was an unnecessary dullness to it. He didn't have to die, and yet there he was, out of nowhere, lifeless and final. Sure, I could have just reloaded my save, but I kind of felt that would have been a disservice to my story. Because despite the fact Skyrim is now showing its age, there's a personality and a permanence to the people and places of this world you just don't get in other games. Everyone has a name, everyone has a house, everyone has a purpose, even if that purpose is to just walk around Whiterun being a sarcastic git all the time.
Do you get to the Cloud District very often? Oh, what am I saying? Of course you do.
Yeah, don't push it if you want to survive this playthrough, mate. The enjoyment of these places comes from more than just their aesthetic beauty. I've talked at length about how beautiful I think Markarth is. This giant knuckle of rock and bronze that's been chiselled out the side of a mountain. But it's the memories preserved within the stone of this place that are special to me now. It's like revisiting somewhere you used to go on holiday when you were a child. And there's a comfort in that. I get quite anxious sometimes when I'm playing a new game. I work myself up about unknown boss fights, feel the pressure to get through and finish it and find all the things and earn all the trophies, and sometimes you just want to go back to some place somewhere that's familiar. I guess by that logic, I'm only going to love Skyrim more and more, the sediment of my appreciation growing playthrough after playthrough, generation after generation. Because I tell you now, if I'm still alive when they release Skyrim's 70th anniversary edition on PlayStation 14, I will be first in line. Skyrim is full of lore. You can easily spend hours inside its libraries, reading textbooks describing a history reaching back millennia, and the towns, palaces, forts and ruins of this land are designed to evoke that sense of ancient otherworldliness. But after nearly a decade of playing this game, it's my own history with it that's bound within the bricks and towers of Markarth, every bit as much as the fictional stories of the bygone Dwemer. Which I guess is a convoluted way of saying the reason I like playing Skyrim so much is because I've already played Skyrim so much, so there must be more to the initial hook. What was the bait that reeled me in to begin with? Again, I think it's more to do with what's not there than what is. Combat in Skyrim is notoriously a bit clunky. You look at Geralt pirouetting through thugs and monsters like some kind of lethal ballerina, and then compare it to... And most people are rightly like, Is this the game you love so much? Well, yes, it is. The magical thing about Skyrim's combat is that, intentional or not, it leaves gaps for your imagination to fill. It's almost like a tabletop RPG in that sense. Every press of R2 a roll of the dice. Every dead Draugr, the games master saying, yes, you killed it. But also more than that. You killed the Draugr. Another rises from its tomb, and another. Soon an inexorable wave of Nordic undead stagger towards you, restless and angry. You grip your blade in one hand, your shield in the other, and strike! Felling one with a piercing blow to the chest, you turn and block a second, bashing its face in with your shield as you do so. A third hits you with ice, your blood turning cold, your senses shrinking, the distance too far, and a shout rips from your lungs, cleaving the very air, flinging the Draugr against the wall like a child's plaything. It twitches pathetically on the floor as your steel punches through its chest, the thing's wretched body shuddering one final time. Look, that's what it feels like to me, okay? Maybe I'm just a bit weird, but often after I've done a cool thing in a video game, I play through an exaggerated version of that thing in my head. And so what was essentially me just hitting R2 a bunch of times while my character hits a bunch of blue-eyed zombies until they die, turns into this cinematically choreographed dance in my mind. I used to do this with Final Fantasy VII too. To me, what was happening on screen was only ever a suggestion. And I get you could say, hey, you're just making excuses for mechanics that aren't as refined as those in other games, and maybe you're right. The combat system in The Witcher 3 is a roaring fire. It's hot and glorious and right there in front of you. Combat in Skyrim is a spark that, upon contact with a flammable imagination, becomes a raging inferno. As you play the game and your character ascends through the levels, you build the legend of this Dragonborn in your mind, picking through a forsworn hideout unseen, sending the whole camp to Sovngarde one silent arrow at a time. Feels fantastic because it's the idea of what you've done rather than the actual physical act that's important. It's pure role-playing. I stay hidden lots in Skyrim, and my stealth stat was the first thing I got to 100. At this level, you can pretty much creep up to someone and be right in front of their face and they won't even know you're there. You can assassinate entire rooms of people like this if you're quick. To the casual onlooker, this might look ridiculous, but to me, it's like, well, yeah, I'm supernaturally good at stealth now. I'm bending light and melting into shadows. I'm an actual ghost. Put the work in and you can fill Skyrim's technical holes with thrilling magic. This works because the game is constantly telling you how good you are. You know, you're the chosen one, the Dragonborn. You can suck the souls off dragons' bones as effortlessly as devouring the meat off a chicken wing. By the end of the game, you're probably the leader of the companions too. A werewolf, the listener and leader of the Dark Brotherhood, the master of the Thieves Guild, archmage of the College of Winterhold, the champion of Skyrim's civil war. Constant fuel for the white-hot mind tempest that is your perception of who your character is and what they can do. Ultimately though, what I've just said could be 2,000 words of white-hot garbage if, for whatever reason, Skyrim just wasn't for you. I've had arguments with Access members past and present about the game, but for me, it's just adventure gaming heaven. A perfect collision of disparate parts, whether by accident or design, all coalescing into this rich, wonderful, fantastical whole. It's a game that captures my imagination like no other, and has gone from being a hot new thing I loved back in 2011 to comfortably one of my favourite games of all time in 2020. Yes, it's massive, yes, it's beautiful, but it's that elusive magic hiding under the surface that, for me, elevates Skyrim above all the other massive and beautiful games on PS4. Do you agree, or do you think I'm barking? Let us know in the comments. Give this video a like if you've ever loaded up your game to find your horse doing this, or indeed if you'd like to hear us swooning over other games we just really like. And don't forget that notification bell. Click it and know immediately when there's another video of me talking about Skyrim for way too long. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.